You're listening to Unmuted Love. Hi there, I'm C. Ushelman, and with 35 years as a marriage and family therapist and 25 years as a parent of 2 children I brought home from the foster care system, I want to welcome you here to Unmuted Love Podcast, the one place where nothing is off limits to say out loud about parenting children from difficult beginnings.
Stop for a minute, stop and breathe for a minute, long it over your head, try to listen instead, won't you? Think for a minute, who you wanna be for a minute, don't get over your head, you're like everyone else, aren't you?
Sometimes it's real sweet around here, and sometimes it ain't so pretty, because this is 100% Unmuted Love. So let's go.
You'll be just
Hey parents, this is C. Get the help you need to end destructive and chaotic behavior in your home while parenting children from difficult beginnings. I know you need help, and the Love Plus parenting model actually works. I'm inviting you to work with me personally for 6 months in my virtual therapeutic parent program, and I guarantee you results, or 100% of your investment back. How is that for a blue ribbon deal? I'm looking forward to working with you. See you on the inside. Welcome to the Unmuted Love Podcast. I'm talking here today with Justine Diaz-Harris, and she's a beautiful woman who has been through a lot in her life, definitely has a story to tell, and I'm so happy to have all of you here today to listen to Justine tell her story. It's so important for us to understand that hope matters, faith matters, and recovery matters. I want to give you the opportunity, Justine, to share your story, your origin story. Like what happened? What happened to you first? How did you get into foster care?
Thank you for the invite, having me come onto your podcast to share my story. I came from a very dysfunctional and abusive household, and I can remember from the beginning, probably like 3 or 4, where maybe the state tried to intervene and I was placed back in the care of, my mother. And it was just very volatile. I had to deal with the molestations, the rapes, like the things that go on in houses where people don't pay attention to their children.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's a horrible early beginning.
Yes. I mean, and it took me a long time to own the fact that it was horrific, because at some point, like you learn to shut off your feelings, shut off communication, like you shut down anything human-like just to kind of get through the day.
Right.
Because you never know when you're going to get hit, when you're going to get smacked, when somebody's going to do this or somebody's going to do that. So, like everything becomes really nonverbal. You could look at somebody, or I could look at somebody and, assume my younger self know what a person was thinking about me and the fact that they were going to get me. So I needed to get them before they got me.
Yeah.
Growing up in that had me build a wall around myself. And then on top of that, there's the conflict of not being safe with your parent.
Right.
Or wanting your parent.
Exactly.
It's just this push-pull thing. You're not going to be safe. You're going to be harmed, but you want them and whatever they could give you. And if that's the harm, then that's what it is. And that's what we associate with love, care, and concern. Abuse, neglect, and dysfunction. You know what I mean?
So painful to hear you say that, but a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, they have children who have experienced what you're talking about. And then the children come into their homes. They're looking to be like happy families, but the child is coming with this wall around
baggage,
right? And like, whoa, no, I know that people are out to get me, and I've got to get them before they get me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a profound impact on just your development, like who you are, how you
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it starts so young.
Yeah.
It's like, how can you ask the child to trust that something is going to be for their good and that's not their experience?
Right. And
You
then
know,
what do you do? What do you do when you're a child in that situation? I'm sure you didn't have adopted parents, but you had foster parents. I'm sure you just saw them as enemies, and some of them were probably, and some of them weren't.
absolutely. And it was more the same, because I'm in a house and I have a foster mother at the time, like with other foster children, girls coming from the same environment with the same cattiness and the same hurt, harm interaction. And my foster parent not really being equipped to deal with that kind of conflict. So it's basically just ignore it or whatever. And what happened to me was I was always on runaway. I always ran away, and where I ran away to was not always safe for me because it was older men and it was the drugs and it was the alcohol and it was, like whatever else I happened to be, around at that time. Because the other thing that was happening for me or to me actually was, like I'm this, like at 12, I was like 5'11", maybe like 110 pounds, like I didn't look like a 12-year-old.
Like a little girl. You didn't look like a
That's
little
right. I mean, and that innocence had been stolen long ago.
girl.
So even if a person isn't looking at me sexually, I'm trying to figure out why not.
Mhm.
So it was very, very, very traumatic. I didn't have the voice or know that that's what I was going through. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I just was very angry, very hostile, very defensive, very dismissive. My husband and I talk about it all the time because I have people who walk up to me and remember me, but I don't remember them. Because when you come from that type of environment, you can't afford to invest in a relationship with them because you're not going to be there long.
I'm so heartbroken just hearing your story. I've heard lots of stories, of course, but just every time I hear a person's story that's this painful, my heart breaks for you. And I know that you have survived it and thrived. And I know it was a long journey and you did a lot of work
Yeah,
to do that. But
I
just, I'm thinking
absolutely
of you
did.
as the little girl, right? That little girl, my heart just breaks for
Mhm.
her. Yeah.
Yes, because she didn't really have a chance. You know,
Hmm.
if I didn't take the opportunity to do therapy, to do counseling, one of the things that happened for me too that was huge was that at like 25, at 25, I had already had a child, two at that point, by two different fathers, both of them much, much older than me. I'm trying to get an education, I'm trying to work a job. I'm catching the bus, like I'm doing everything that I could possibly do to kind of like survive and maintain. But I had specifically my daughter, who I had no clue of how to connect or raise her. Like I wasn't emotionally attached.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wasn't emotionally attached because my relationship with my son was automatic. It was instant, and I realized at that time that my mother taught me how to love the boys, but she didn't teach me how to love the girls, right?
Right.
So even though I didn't want my relationship, and I wasn't using drugs because I quit because I didn't want to do the same thing to my daughter that my mother had done to me, and I wanted to be present, like all of that, I did not have the skills.
Yeah.
Like I was a parent with no parenting skills.
Right? Because those are imprints that you get in the first couple of years of life, and those went missing for you.
Yeah. And not only that, like when I had my daughter, I had her to fix me, for me to love her, for her to love me. It was going to be me and her. I didn't care about recreating the absence of a parent
Mhm.
because that's what I did. I didn't care nothing about him. It was all about her. So I had her, and she was 4 years old. And I remember just blacking out, and I hit her. and I hit her. At the time I was going to school, I was working, I was catching the bus to go to school. Just the stress of not having support. Because the other thing that happens too is that I didn't want anybody around my children. So I was not asking for help. Nobody could just babysit or stay overnight or none of that. And really, what I got in touch with later on after, like I ended up hitting my daughter. I blacked her eye. It was just like an out of body experience. She was 4 years old and it was just an out of body experience. So my mother saw my daughter and called the police on me.
After all you'd been through with your mom, right?
Right. I was like, if this isn't the pot calling the kettle black, are you kidding me? But anyway, and she was still with my molester. So at the time, like I'm in the police station, and I'm begging the officer to handcuff me because my daughter cannot be, with her and with him. And, I'm just, ugh. And the judge ended up sending me to anger management, parenting classes, therapy, counseling, this plethora of stuff, but I remember praying just before it happened, like, God, just please help me. And I didn't know that the help was gonna be what it was.
It was going to help.
But it was the catalyst that changed my life because I was able to learn how to be a parent, a loving, present, communicating type parent. I learned how to cook, learned how to go to sleep at night. I learned how to not respond to the tantrum. And I was 5 fighting my 5-year-old daughter.
Right.
That's
right.
what
That's all you had. Mm-hmm.
She's 5 and I'm trying to figure out why she's acting like she's 5 when she needs to be acting like she's 15. You know what I mean? It just, the judge just kind of like sent my life. I started participating more fully in a 12-step program, even though I hadn't used in a long time. Like the behaviors are still present, the lack of being able to communicate, the isolation, the distrust of others, like all those things that come into play with people who suffer with addictions, right?
Right. With trauma and addiction, right? Trauma and addiction.
So I did that, and I'm going to share something else too, because something else happened at that point. My son's father, his ex-wife ended up calling me and saying, at the time, my son's father was in prison. So the ex-wife called me and she said, Justine, I got some news. I have to figure out how to tell my son. At the time, her son was probably 8. I think my son was 4. And she had to tell her son that he was positive. This is like in 1995, right? 1995, as a result of my behavior, I got to get tested. My son has to get tested. Please, God, don't let it be my son. Because I was okay with, the consequences of my decisions being on me. But I am telling you, if the results had been any other way, other than him not being infected, I probably would have killed myself. But he wasn't.
Oh.
And I was. And I just, anybody I was talking to, I was like, I got to get tested. My son has to get tested. This is what's happening. This is what's, and I'm positive he's not. And I'm just going to go with it. Right.
That's a blow in and of itself, though, right? Woo.
Yeah. All those things, I'm 25 and my life is over. Now I have to prepare these children for life without me. So in doing that, my children knew how to catch the bus, knew how to make their food. And they left my house before they were 16. My daughter stayed until she was like just before her 16th birthday. And then my son left just before his 18th birthday. And my thought was, I got you so much further than my mother got me.
Right.
And you're prepared. Because the therapy that I did, is the therapy that they did. We did family counseling. We did individual therapy. I was big on it. My daughter had a really hard time during her teenage years because she knew that something was wrong and I wasn't telling. She thought I had cancer. So, when I did finally tell her, she was mad and angry because I would hyperventilate with just the thought of telling them.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, just let me live to see my grandchildren. So, okay, you know, so I'm here. A lot of my friends are not because they couldn't tell. I'm married. I'm positive. My husband isn't, like my life is amazing,
Your
but
life is amazing.
it would have never, ever gotten to that had I not had the opportunity to be offered something different.
Yeah. It's ironic, actually, that it's your mother who got you help inadvertently, right? The thing that
Oh yeah. Oh
really,
yeah. Oh yeah.
that's ironic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that kind of like told me, or what I learned from that is that I started to believe in something bigger than me,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And in my belief in something bigger than me, it was like, you know what? Whatever someone's intent to hurt you is, God is always, the God of my understanding is always protecting me so that it works out for my good.
Can always get something, right? Something positive from what
Something
in the
positive.
moment feels overwhelmingly negative. Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I sure understand that.
Yes. And when I ask for God's help, it always looks so much worse. Like it looks horrible with me looking at it,
Hmm.
because I'm not looking at it with a clear lens. Like I got, my emotions tied to it and my image tied to it and yeah, like pride and ego and whatever else pops up
Right.
tied to how this is looking. Never mind in their life, but in mine. All this stuff is stuff that I learned as a result of just talking to other people and taking a look at me and trusting in the community. Because I did end up finding a community, and that consisted of people who were trying to be there for me when I was younger, that I couldn't allow to be there for me, and new people who were there for me. My mother passed away before or just after her 50th birthday. 25 years ago, cirrhosis of the liver, just after my husband and I had got married and my diagnosis and everything else that hit the fan, right? Because I think my daughter's father died that year too. She was like 11. Well, she was younger than that, but no, he died later. And my son's father died later, right? But they were young. Like, I think my son was 7 when his father passed away, and my daughter was 11 when her father passed away.
Wow, that's a
So,
lot of loss, right? A lot of loss in your, like epigenetically,
yes,
right? Just family of origin
yes.
and in your child's family of origin and your
Hmm.
life. Ooh, lots of tragedy.
So at the end, my mother didn't want anybody but me. And, like she had my brothers there. I have 3 younger brothers. She had them there. She had her husband, who she chose over me there. But she needed closure from me. And because of the work that I had done and allowing somebody to say to me, do the right thing for the right reason, not necessarily because she's my mom, but because she's somebody who is suffering,
Right.
because she was suffering at the end. And all the times that I wished her to die, I was like, God, okay, I'm good. You could take her now. I don't need to see no more, you know?
Yeah.
And she ended up passing away, like I said to her, listen, I'm good. I'm okay. The boys will be fine. And she went that night, you know, and it was the same thing with my son's father. Like I went to the hospital to see him, and my husband was like, why are you going to see him? And he did this to you. And it's like, no, we make choices, right? And he needs to know that I'm not mad with him about whatever's happened. Like, so I went to see him, and let him know that I wasn't mad and that I still loved him and cared about him. And he passed away the next day. So those are the kinds of experiences that I've had that just kind of solidify the fact that I'm on the right path. Right?
Yeah, there's this concept of there's trauma, the impact of trauma, right? And then there's post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm.
And you are sort of a poster child for right, the trauma on one hand, and then the post-traumatic growth on the other, right? You came out of this with so much uh,
Mm-hmm.
because of who you are, like you have a spark of light, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that trauma
Mm-hmm.
didn't destroy your spark. It covered it up and kept it, away
Yes.
from you and others for a long
Mm-hmm.
time, but you recovered it, right? You found your light again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
To
amazing.
the
You're
best
amazing.
of my ability.
Yeah, I love that. I love
Thank you.
you are such a beautiful example to people who, so people listening here, often people who listen to me or come to my work have children who are grown up or growing up or they're adulting, but they're not doing a very good job of it as you described, right? It was really hard for you to get on your feet. And once you even had a child, like you weren't really able to thrive with your child in the beginning because you didn't know how to do it. And so a lot of
Yes.
parents here have adult children who are struggling and suffering. And I keep saying, just give them time, right? Give them time. Don't give up on them. Give them time to get a little older, a little more maturity, and some help. And all of that can really matter. You
Mm-hmm.
have to get some maturity, right? Like like you were saying that you were 5 years old, fighting with your five.
Yes.
And so that's the way it is.
Yeah.
It's like when you're 25, you're only like 15 or,
Absolutely.
15 years old, just trying to survive your life, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I wanted to say that, like the other thing is that generational curses are real.
Oh, yeah.
And through God's grace, I've been able to break that for my family, right?
Right.
So my kids aren't drug users. They aren't menaces to society. Now they were, but
But
they're
they grew
not
up, right? They grew
now.
up too.
Yes, but like I had mentioned, my daughter left before her 16th birthday. And when she left, she ended up being a teen mom. So she leaves with her boyfriend. And every night she's calling, or every morning, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, Mom, come get me. He's hitting on me. And I just had to talk to her about the similarities. The fact that, you're fighting now, but you love him and you're going to be back with him after it all calms down. That's sharing my experience of how it happened for me with her. And I can't come get you because you're going to go back. Like, already, no. And it's just interrupting your process. Cause, like, even though it's painful for me, because I've had the experience, like, I can't say how it's going to pan out for her. But my hope is that, like her being in that situation provides a limitation for her. Like the limitation being that I'm not going to be in an abusive relationship. I'm not going to be in a relationship where people put their hands on me or they're hollering and screaming. Like I don't want that for my kids. And as a result of me letting her go to learn her lesson, not let her go and never speaking to her, but, just having identification with her saying, like, I know you love him. And I know, and she had 2 kids by the same guy who wasn't doing anything. And, I said to her, the truth was she thought that in having 2 children by the same dad made her better than me, who had children by 2 different guys. So it didn't matter the standard of the guy. Just don't let it be 2 different dads, right? But those were the conversations that I was having with her. And even today, like she's 34. she wants us to move together and we can leave my husband and, my mother-in-law in the apartment where they are, and we'll just, be in the house with, like all her children, because she has like 4 now by 3 different guys, right? But what I'm experiencing with her now is reiterating to her that it's okay to ask for help, because I raised her to be self-sufficient. And self-sufficiency is very harmful when you don't know what to do, right?
Right. When you can't be interdependent.
Right. So, I'm saying to her, pleading with her, babe, please just ask me for help. Let me help you. It's okay. And her saying, well, I didn't want to, because she's not asking nobody for nothing. She had the same mistake I had and not taking them to court for child support. I kick myself all the time, but I had the mindset that they're my children. They're my children, and I'm going to take care of my children. So, the dads have no say, no pay, no say. But it's amazing to me to kind of like watch the dynamic, because what we're seeing today is just generation after generation not knowing what to do, right?
Right. It's very hard to break like you can break some parts, right, of the transmission process, but the part that's the imprint, the attachment part goes with generation
Mm-hmm.
to generation, right? That self-sufficiency is more like you're an island unto yourself, right? And
Yes.
you're going to be an island no matter what, and everybody else got to stay out. And then you pass that on, that piece he gets passed on, right? And now your
Yeah.
daughter's struggling with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to
And
break
not
that.
having to keep the secret, and, to show her emotion or have feeling or be disappointed or be frustrated or be hurt. Like, she has 3 boys. She just had a girl in February, and her thought was that they were all going to be a family, and her daughter was not going to grow up without a dad. But you like what you like, and you do what you do. And he's there. They're not going to be a family.
Good for her. Yeah. Those patterns, right, are hard to break.
With her daughter. So she's like, have this play out, and I'm apologizing every day. It's like, I'm so sorry.
Well, you did the best you could do with what you had, right? And so
I did.
that's where self-compassion is so important for all of us who are
Yeah.
parents. None of us did it all right,
No,
and
no, we did.
most of us didn't get it all right when we were children either. So we just try to do
Right.
better, right? When you know better, you do better. And
You
over
know
time,
better, you do.
right, you're
That's right.
doing, yeah. And she will too. And it's the same with my daughter. I have a 28-year-old daughter. She has had 3 children, and she's an island too.
Mhm.
She's adopted. She came with with walls, and she
Yes.
never let me in.
Hmm.
And it was so hard on her because she wanted to, but she
Yeah.
couldn't. Yep.
Right.
And so now she's 28 and she's still an island, and she lets me in a little bit, but sort of just in certain ways,
Hmm.
not, she'll come looking for a hug, she'll come looking for support and soothing, but then she's got to run off, right?
Yeah, because it gets too uncomfortable.
That's right. It gets too uncomfortable. So she's still working through that. She's 28, still working through it. And I'm giving her love and compassion and supporting her to have a trajectory of her own,
Hmm.
because she does need her own life, and she has her own
Yeah.
trajectory. It's not what mine is. It's got to be what
Right.
hers is.
Yes. Through her own experiences,
Hmm.
and she'll be fine. My
Right.
daughter will be fine. My son will be fine. I just have to stay out the way
Yeah. And they'll
and
figure
not
it out.
insert myself,
My
into their life lessons.
Yeah, my problem was I was overhelping,
Mm,
right? The more
mm,
just like what you described, like when your daughter would call you and say, "Oh, come get me," and you're like, "No, you gotta learn your own lesson." I wish I had like some of that. I don't have that I mean, I really have had to learn to have that. Stay out of it. Stay out of it. Stay out of it, because they have to learn, and they can't learn 100% from my experience. I can share it, I can talk about it. When it gets right down to it, they have to skin their own knees,
Yes.
And that's
Right.
hard. It's hard for a parent, right? To let go like that.
Well, you can't take it personal.
Right.
I mean, really, you can't, because I don't know what the average teenager or 21 or 25 or 28-year-old, I'm jaded in that expectation of what it should be like, right? Because I had my experience, and then I have other people's experiences that I'm watching. So I can't necessarily be the guide on how it's supposed to look at any certain point. Because I don't know.
Yeah.
So for me, everything that my children are doing is like normal stuff.
Learning as you go. Learning
Yeah.
as you go. Yeah. And we can just be here to love them, and sometimes be a hand, and sometimes keep your hands to yourself, right?
Yes. And and unconditionally, do I have time to tell you this one last story?
If you have time, I'm loving talking with you.
So my son grew up with a sense of entitlement. And my son was always very funny, very charismatic all through his teens and, being younger. And because I had such difficulty with my daughter, I didn't pay attention to the fact that my son had mental illness. So it showed up in him being, charismatic, energetic, and, he would give me a good 90 days. And then on the 91st day, something would hit the fan, right? But he ended up a couple years ago, this was like recently, when he was like 20, 28, and he had been self-medicating over time, right? So the drinking, the smoking weed, and, all of that. So he ends up in crisis. And his crisis showed up, and he was stalking me. He was, like going on Facebook talking about I molested him. It was just horrific, all to get me to himself, because he needed me with him. That was the whole thing, right? And I was like, I can't be with you. He went off the deep end. He wouldn't take medication. Like I ended up having to have, he was committed to the psychiatric ward and the hospital, and police were involved, and they would take him to the hospital, and he would be committed, and he'd get out, and he wouldn't take his medicine. And it was beyond belief. It was a nightmare. And he showed up at my job one day after he drove from Texas with 4 dogs in a car. He hadn't slept. He's in front of my job, and like the whole downtown is outside trying to figure out what's going on with this kid who has the 4 dogs in his car, hanging out the sunroof, talking about, I want her arrested. She raped me. She molested me. Yeah. He's 28. They ended up locking him up, but I had to get a restraining order. And because it was so horrific to the judge, she gave me 2 years. She had never done that.
That's a long restraining order. Yeah.
2 years of no contact, no social media, because he was attacking me on social media. Anybody who would listen, just no phone calls, no nothing. And for as much as that hurt me, I didn't talk to him for 2 years, because he could not do that to me. That's my boundary.
That's right. You had to have a boundary, for sure.
You can't call me names. You can't threaten my life. You can't threaten my livelihood. You eat like, I've been good to you. I've been here for you. I've been supportive of you. And this is an absolute no-go. He has come back a whole new person. Whole new person.
That was a miracle.
And he never wants that to happen again.
Yeah. It's just
But
like what
he
happened
knows that it will.
Yeah.
So, take your medications.
Well, that's the same that happened to you, right? Something really terrible happened to you, and
Mhm.
then there was a positive outcome to all the help you got, and the same with him, right?
Mhm. And I had to hear everybody say, "Oh, how could you do that? I would never. I would never." And I was like, "And that is why your children are cussing you out every time." Not having that. I just can't,
Good for you.
you know?
Justine, I could talk to you all day. I could just talk to you all day and listen to you and just really relate to your story in so many ways.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for just being a ray of light and also, a truth teller, letting people see, you're the child that had a wall around her, and all of a sudden you're letting your wall down. You're not all of a
Yeah.
sudden, it's through work, I know. But you're letting your wall down and you're letting the world hear your story. And it's a real tale of, a hero's journey, right? Because you've made it here and
Mhm.
you're in a beautiful place. You have a beautiful soul, and I'm glad that you are letting your walls out down, and letting it
Yeah.
all out. So thank you so
Mhm.
much for sharing with Unmuted Love your story.
Thank
And
you for having me.
yeah, you are welcome. I hope our paths cross in the future. I really do.
Yes. Yes. Please keep in touch.
Okay. Thank you again.
Because the journey continues.
Doesn't it? Yeah. Who knows what we'll talk about in 10 years from now.
Right.
Take care now.
Yes. You as well.
Stop for a minute. Stop and breathe for a minute. Long it over your head. Try to listen instead, won't you? Think for a minute. Who you wanna be for a minute. Don't get over your head. You're like everyone else, aren't you? You could gain from being a bit nicer. Knowing to talk and when to shut your mouth.
The Unmuted Love podcast is hosted by me, C. Eshelman, attachment and trauma specialist at the Attach Place in Sacramento, California. Our podcast producer is the amazing Saya Clark, and our theme song is Nicer by Houses on the Hill, licensed through Epidemic Sound. Thank you for being such loyal listeners here on Unmuted Love. I'll see you all next week.
You'll be just fine.